This is the Michael Bryan Show. Hi everyone, welcome back to the show, and today I am joined with Dr. Diane Dye, who's the CEO of People Risk Consulting. She's an organisational change expert and actually helps executives turn real-world challenges into scalable results and growth. Diane, thanks so much for taking the time and joining me today.
It's a pleasure to be here, Michael.
So I thought we'd see why it's important to actually experience challenges, and when you're trying to grow something, whether it's a company or a business, why are they important?
It's so important to really recognize when challenges take place because it's kind of like turning your business into an ostrich. How do ostriches behave? They stick their head in the sand whenever anything threatens them. Does it change? No, it doesn't change. But what it does is it puts off the inevitable. And that's the same thing that you're doing in your business. If there's a problem, a challenge, something going on that is just does not feel right, when you stick your head in the sand and wait for it to pass, that's when you actually compound the problems and you don't really respond to the environment that's changing around you or the conditions around the problem. You just wait it out. But sometimes when you're waiting it out, things actually get worse.
That was the bit that I was just about to think about, was there must be some negatives to avoiding difficult situations or avoiding the things that are changing.
Absolutely. There's always a benefit, and that's why we end up doing it, is because we think that when we wait it out, it's just going to go away or it's going to decrease. And there is a difference between pausing and waiting it out. A pause is strategic. A pause is a hold while you gather information. Now you come into awareness, consciousness, you really measure any emotional responses around the challenge. But putting your head in the sand is this isn't happening. It's denial, it's disavowal, it's ego. It's something that drives you actually down this downward spiral of actually things that cause further breakdowns. So when you come into awareness, consciousness, and humility, which is the first step of critical opportunity thinking, part of my critical opportunity method, you use that pause strategically to come into awareness about the situation, the environments around that situation, and manage any immediate emotional responses in the senior team so that you can approach this as an experiment, as a way to learn versus something to avoid.
I found it interesting when you mentioned critical opportunity. So what makes it critical? Why is that the thing to go for versus, maybe another opportunity that's less critical?
So, a critical opportunity, and this is something that I have coined in my workbook, Creating Critical Opportunity, that's available on Amazon, is a generative moment where there is a problem. It doesn't have to be a crisis, but I use the word critical because it is critical that we learn and grow from this. So it's a generative opportunity, a generative moment where you can make a choice to either lean in, to learn from, to actually come into a space of solving, or you devolve and you come into a place of blame, of victimization, of isolation, of joining forces with people who are going to co-sign your negative attitude, thus driving the organization further down this rabbit hole that ultimately results in more failure, not less. So critical opportunity is that time where you have that chance, that opportunity to learn from whatever failure problem has happened, and you come out better, you come out stronger, you come out more innovative.
It actually makes me think of, the idea of if you're standing still, you're actually going backwards, and this thing of you need to be constantly trying to move forwards in some way to avoid all of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is the practice of moving forward in a way that's not going to create exhaustion from change, chaos from change. It's a way to move forward in a measured way that's also not going to drive the team involved with the initial strategy of the change into panic, into any emotions that might be triggered by going outside of status quo, outside of the comfort zone.
It sounds like there are some benefits, or at least some things that happen when you're having your head out of the sand, to reuse that metaphor, so that you can actually find these things. Like, what are some of the results of that?
Absolutely. When you are willing to look and spot not just what the symptom of the problem is, but the core cause of the problem, that root cause, you can then explore the conditions around that root cause to actually solve the problem. This morning, I was on my TikTok live, and there was a gentleman in there who ran a meatpacking company in New Mexico. And he was just beside himself because the numbers weren't adding up. And he said, my problem is that my employees are shortcutting paperwork. And I leaned in. I said, is it? Is that the problem, or is that the symptom of the problem? I said, tell me more. He said, well, the the numbers just aren't adding up, and I really think that someone might be stealing from the company. So okay, well, maybe they are, and maybe they're not, but let's go deeper on this problem. So net at the end of this conversation, towards the tail end, what we figured out was that they had plenty of systems accountability in place, but their human accountability was lacking. They had inspectors who would go and they would look at the numbers, but the inspectors were just looking at the numbers and reporting the problem upward. The inspectors were not actively involved in the problem solving process. So I asked him, what specific number is off on what days of the week? Who is on shift at that time? We want to become really aware of the problem here. So then we can develop a micro experiment that's going to allow them to mitigate this people risk, because they don't know right now. Right now it's an assumption. It's someone could be stealing, the numbers are off. We really don't know. So when we have the courage, the bravery to question something, we do come into reality. We get out of that reflexive loop that's in our leadership brains about this could be happening, maybe this is happening, and that's freak out zone. So you could pause and you could stick your head in the sand at that point, or you could pull your head out. You can look around, you can find the real problem, and then you can craft a very intentional experiment on, is this true or is this not true? Is this assumption? Is this bias? Is this maybe something that I'm installing onto this as a leader who's been burned by this before? Or is this reality? And when you come into reality like that, you can pull the opportunity out of the problem. You can see a wider view, and you can resolve things at their root source.
It sounds like you'd have to be very good at difficult conversations, because you got to be able to speak to these people and, be really honest with them about what's been happening, what they've noticed, and maybe even they are doing what you think that they're doing, but maybe they're not. So how do we have these kinds of conversations?
So a conversation doesn't become difficult until you ask the word why. The reason for this is because why is a very emotional word. I ask you why 7 times, Michael, I will get you in tears. I will get you thinking about your childhood past, and I will take you all the way back, and I will bring you straight into your heart. There is a time and a place for the why, and it's when you want to get into the heart. But when you're talking about business, you don't want to do, as Simon Sinek says, and start with why, because why is very emotional. You do want to start with why in your brands because you want to develop an affinity. But when you're looking for data, you're going to want to have questions like, help me understand what creates this number drop in your view. So you're not attacking them. You're not attacking a position. What you're doing is you're bringing them onto your team, and you're solving this together. Now, if they are covering up, you're going to begin to notice some behavioral signs that they're covering up. They're going to be looking down a lot. When someone looks down a lot, that's fabrication. So you can then become present and aware about the conversation you're having and not framing it up as I'm having a difficult conversation, framing it up as we're solving a issue together and we're on the same team in solving this issue. When you come into something, and I'll continue to use this meat packing plant example, when you come into this I know they're stealing, that brings a certain amount of energy to it. And when you go to have that conversation, that energy is straight behind those words. So if you can drop that, I tell my clients, be willing to unlearn what you think you know. And if you're willing to unlearn what you think you know, you can open to iteration. You're not having a difficult conversation. You are having an exploratory problem solving conversation where they're on your side. The truth will be revealed. But how you approach that is so much more of an exploratory, experimental way where you actually get down ultimately to the real deal. And do I know if those employees are stealing? Absolutely. I don't know. But what I do know is that now I have a leader who is willing to ask a question and is willing to problem solve with those who are providing the human oversight. He's willing to look at the systems, but he's willing to do that one problem at a time. These conversations become tense, they could become complex when you start to solve multiple problems at once. That's why that power of the pause is incredibly important, because I want to look for that one domino, that one thing that is like, this is the research question I have. The research question I have is, what are the conditions around the discrepancies in the numbers? What are the commonalities of those? And that doesn't personally attack anybody, but someone who is doing wrong will feel personally attacked. And that's where, again, some more data arises.
And I know that you're actually an advocate for experimenting and testing things and trying things. Why is it important to see things in that way?
It's important to have an experimentation mindset because it's important to realize that you don't know. And if you sit there with that for just a little bit and go, you know what, there is a lot that I don't know, I can then approach the problem with a little bit of humility and go, okay, there are things that I don't know, and that's okay. I don't have a crystal ball. So what I am willing to do is run a micro experiment. And this is incredibly important because if you make an assumption and then you make an assumption on top of an assumption, and then you make another assumption and you call it an action plan or implementation plan, and you roll something out. I'm seeing this a lot with AI right now. There's an assumption that something's going to improve the organization or maybe replace a department or whatever with AI. And there's an assumption on top of assumption that leads to, okay, here's the implementation plan for this great new system that's going to resolve so much for us because that's what the salesperson told us. And so they purchase the system and then they roll it out in their company. And then they realize that their human resistance is high, that their implementation is off, that their adoption is low, that they really didn't actually look at what the specific problem that the system is going to solve. So what did they do? They just wasted thousands, if not millions of dollars, assuming all the way up to the rollout. And then the rollout is their experiment. That is expensive. That is like having a boiling pot of water with spaghetti in it. And that spaghetti is what you're trying out in your company. And the executives takes his hand and sticks in the pot of water, grabs spaghetti and flings it at the wall. The burning of the hand, that is cash flow suffering. That is culture suffering. That is a whole lot of suffering in the service of, we know what to do. Maybe you don't. And when you lean into maybe you don't, and some human-centered design principles, human-centered design, of course, born at Stanford University, understanding that when you're crafting something to keep in mind the end user, when you understand that and you craft a very intentional experiment, and maybe that intentional experiment starts with, I'm just going to have an open discussion about where the pain is in this company in relation to what the system might solve. Before making the purchase, you began to see very clearly, with spending no money, by the way, spending no money, CFOs out there, this is very budget friendly. Spending no money, you begin to see where the actual problems are and if the system's going to solve it. And it starts with one question. So that would be, what are the problems in the organization related to the points that the system solves for? And you start having conversations. The art of conversation has been lost in many companies because conversation is seen as, oh no, a manager's talking to me, this must be punitive. And that culture has to be unseated for experimentation to work. Psychological safety has to be a priority in the organization. And sounds like a woo-woo statement, and it is not. Psychological safety at its core basically says it's okay for things not to work. In fact, when it's okay for things not to work, team members try things more often, and they might fail at some things, but they fail much less expensively than they do if there's a full rollout. Thousands, if not millions, are spent on a hunch, on an assumption. And the reason why people do it is because sometimes their hunches are right. And sometimes it works. And sometimes you hit gold. And sometimes you create a whole lot of organizational pain.
The way that you painted that picture earlier sounded so almost chaotic, where everything's kind of all over the place, no one really knows what's going on, and yet you're expected to move quickly, I guess. Or maybe that's another assumption that they're making, where we need to press fire on this, we need to get things off the ground, and before you know it, it's almost like if you move too quickly and break things, you then spend more time trying to fix the things that you've broken, where if you slowed down and took your time, maybe you wouldn't have to go back and fix anything. You make the appropriate steps beforehand. You don't have to go back and waste all that time trying to fix it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think this is where taking some frameworks such as Agile as canon, it really fails, because what Agile says is we're just constantly trying, and we're just constantly doing, and we're constantly and we're constantly and we're constantly, and there's a great drive and a great urgency behind it. So we're just trying and failing, trying and failing. And yes, it is okay to fail with Agile methodology. But the problem is that sometimes it can create what I call change chaos. And you're so busy being agile and being responsive that you don't realize that you've become reactive. And it's so important to craft your culture and experimentation culture that is proactive versus reactive. You're not always being the firefighter in that case. I'm sure there are people listening today that are exhausted. You're tired of being the firefighter in your organization. You're tired of being the hero, the one who steps up and has to solve for everything. You're tired of this. You're exhausted. And I will tell you, you're right. You're right. That is a bias mask. Those masks that I just named, the firefighter, the only closer, the lone wolf, there's 10 of them. And they stop your experimentation dead in the tracks. I guess the light at the end of the tunnel is that is something that is 100% within your control to remove. You don't have to, in the name of agile methodology, be the firefighter and know that things are always moving and things are always chaotic, but this is our culture, and this, you don't have to co-sign that anymore. What if you didn't have to be a firefighter? If you didn't have to be a firefighter, you could spend more time being strategic. You could spend more time looking at the 30,000-foot view of your organization and going, okay, here are my stress points. Here are the places where things aren't working quite right. Maybe they're not in full crisis or breakdown or anything that's spectacular, but maybe there's just a little bit of pain. And you can look at, and I have an organizational pain scale. It's available at peopleriskconsulting.com. You can look at that organizational pain scale and you can go, that's causing the most pain. I'm going to craft a micro experiment around that and see if I can't get that knot to loosen up a little bit so that it's not as painful. And you're doing that in initially it is reactive because you're seeing the knot. But when you do this enough, you can be proactive. You can have playbooks in place because you know that this knot's up. So you can have strategies at the front end so that it doesn't. And that's the beauty of experimentation strategy is it's not like you're moving slow, is that you're moving intentionally. You can still do this very, very quickly. In fact, if you're an organization that moves very fast and you're a person that moves very fast, you can engage in what tech companies do, and that is rapid prototyping, rapid experimentation. But I will tell you right now, we're not on iPhone version 1 anymore. But there was an iPhone version 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4. And when you're automatically trying to go for the iPhone 8 right out the gate, some days you might not even launch because you're afraid to do that experimentation, that getting the imperfect out there so you can get feedback.
What are some of the ideas that are cost effective? Because I'd imagine even the iPhone 1 maybe out of some companies' budgets to put together. So what are some micro experiments that are cost effective, do you think?
Absolutely. Let's take it from the prototyping standpoint. Micro experiment number 1. Who has the pain? Just who has the pain that you want to solve? Let's find that out as a step 1. Like, are you trying to solve a pain that's real? Are you trying to solve for something that nobody wants? Zuckerberg just lost billions of dollars trying to resurrect the metaverse. The metaverse, if you rewind back to the early 2000s, had its first iteration. It was called Second Life. So, did he truly go out and develop true, clear use cases? Or did he say, this is something really cool that I want, and I think you should want it too? So, experiment number 1 is on that organizational pain scale, who is it that has the most pain around this? And start having conversations with them. That costs zero money. Zero money. So that's step 1, have conversations. Okay, so now let's just say that you've had some conversations and you are finding that there is a pain there that needs to be resolved. Step 2, draw something up. Draw something up. You're not patenting anything. You're not doing any of that. You're just drawing something up and you're going back and you're having the conversations. And you're going to have the conversations with the same people and you're going to have conversations with different people. Get their feedback, listen, take their feedback, and then use that to develop. By the time you're actually ready to go to market, now you have a test group that can pilot this, that can be your early adopters. Why? Because you've brought them along the journey. Now, I've been talking about product development, but this aligns with change management as well. When you look at various change models, the most successful change models, in my view, are the ones that lean into building a guiding coalition, bringing people along with you in the change, not just dropping change on them, but bringing people along in the change, understanding the pain behind the change, understanding the necessity of the change, micro testing things so that by the time you do make that huge capital expenditure that does need to be made, that it's actually solving for something. So I always tell people, don't spend dime one in your business until you've had the conversations. And I will tell you, it is incredibly tempting to do it the other way around. I recently myself did it the other way around too, because I was so excited as a founder about the idea that I had. So I had to get it out. I had to make it move. I had to start developing. I had to bring in a sales team. I had to do all of this stuff. And ah, me too. I'm not just an academic. So I'm Dr. Diane Dye. I'm an experimentation strategist. Executives bring me in the room too, but I'm not immune. I am also a founder. I am also a CEO. I also get swept away in innovation fervor because there's something really cool that I need to roll out because this is just going to solve everyone's problem. And with any change, you're really going to want to drill down and go, does this solve a problem? So now I'm rewinding. Now I'm rewinding my team. I'm saying, you know what? All you're doing is you're having conversations with founders and CEOs. You're having these conversations. You're seeing what pain this solves or doesn't solve. And where this goes, they're going to tell us. And it's not going to be developed in a vacuum. With that comes results. And with that, when you're changing something in an organization, that comes with buy-in. That comes with people who are your advocates and your allies. That comes with understanding maybe who in the organization is a flat out anti or even someone who would try to sabotage the project. But these conversations, this early communication is so incredibly important. And yeah, it's experimental communication at first, and then it becomes a test, it becomes an experiment. But no one really sat down with us and said, "Hey, here's how you experiment. Here's how you use various experimentation strategies." And I have an app that I've created that will teach people, and I'll give it to you, Michael, for your listeners, that'll teach people, what masks are in place. How do I experiment? What maybe experimentation strategy is needed here based on the timeline, the runway that I have. And when you come into that and you understand that, you can then take action from a place of a little bit higher certainty than, okay, we're going to just throw this at the wall and see if this works.
I'm really curious because hindsight's 2020. What have you learned from being someone that has gone through this? What sort of things did you learn that could help others shortcut the process and hopefully not fall victim to it?
I will tell you about the launcher, really, when I want to say the sputtered rocket that was my first version of my CEO innovation cohort. I was so excited because I really missed, me personally, I missed being in school. I missed having a cohort of people that I could work through things that are hard with and come out the other side, and everyone's cheering everyone on. And I was just hungry for that. And I thought others would be hungry for it too. So I thought, this is great. This is great. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to launch the CEO innovation cohort, and they're going to have a choice of, doing this for a month or a year. And they can go through this cohort and there's nothing extra to do. And you can solve your problems with a group of 9 other people who are just like you, because there's a vetting process and we don't let anyone in who isn't X, Y, and Z. And this is great. We're going to do this. And it was the old field of dreams analogy. If you build it, they will come. And I will tell your listeners, if you build it and people don't want it, they're not going to come. They're not going to show up. If you build it, you're going to waste a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of energy, and it's going to hurt, and they're not going to come. Why? Because you haven't had the conversation. So ultimately, I sat down with one of my clients and I said, this is something that I want to do. And she says, I might be wrong, but it sounds like an awfully long amount of time. Like, I think about a quarter, I think about a year. Like, this just automatically starts to get overwhelming. I don't even know what I'm going to talk about over the next quarter or the next year. Like, I don't know. It doesn't really drive me to want to sign up for or show up to anything. And then when you tell me that, I need to fill out this application for this, and you all like, this is really heavy. And I thought, oh, wow, it was really exciting to me. But then again, I'm one of those weirdos who likes school. So it really encouraged me to start having the conversations with the CEOs, with the founders, with the executives, going, all right, so I teach experimentation strategy and I'm willing to cry uncle on myself for this, but I launched something and we're talking about technology backends, we're talking about everything. I'm like, let's go, 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 go. And I think that that's natural. I think there's not a single business owner that's listening to this podcast today that is not nodding their head right now and going, yeah, I just want to drive things forward. And the fact of the matter is, by crazily driving things forward like I just did, I set my project back at least 6 months. So now I take a beat and go, okay. I don't know if you've ever heard of the contractor's dilemma, like the shoemaker's children have no shoes, the plumber's house has leaky pipes. This is the same thing. I had to go back and go, whoa, all right, babe, back to basics. Back to basics. Let's have some conversations about what people are really struggling with, because I'm no newbie on the business block. This is year 10. I'm hitting year 10 in business. And I've been doing a lot of one-on-one work. And I just thought, oh, well, I've been doing one-on-one work for 10 years. I'm just going to pick up this, and this is my assumption. And I'm just going to put this into a group format and it's all going to work. No, no, it really, really isn't, because what people talk about one-on-one is way different than what they'll talk about in a group and what they want in a group. So asking those questions is incredibly important. I think it's kind of a, come down to earth moment for me as someone who is a founder and CEO of my company that says, all right, well, here's proof positive, Diane, that you're not just an academic. You are an in the dirt entrepreneur and you're going through this very same thing. So now I've got to take myself and I've got to rewind myself and start having those conversations and start looking at their organizational pain and build it in that way. And now I find myself in this beautiful place of saying, okay, well, square one time, but not square one time, because there are the things that are the base of the firm that I don't have to blow up. You don't have to blow it up when you're innovating. You just have to keep your comfort, keep your status quo as it is, and you iterate slowly. It's not like you flip the light switch on change and it's changed. You are going to iterate and you are going to grow, and to avoid some of these problems, it's almost a personal battle of looking yourself in the mirror and going, I'm okay. And what I do today is creating results for tomorrow. And if I need runway to do this, maybe that's my domino. Get the runway, knock that over. Maybe it's not the experimentation yet. Maybe your experiment is, oh my gosh, like literally, we just had a massive revenue loss and I need to knock over this domino. That's the domino I need to knock over right now. And this future growth is what I have conversations about today. I'm still moving forward. I'm still tickling that need to move forward. But maybe the move forward is I'm having 3, 4, 5 conversations a day with executives, and I'm really coming to understand, and I'm understanding the theme behind what I'm being told. And what's great is that then the change, the innovation begins to develop itself. The weight just comes off and it just has the opportunity to become, versus forcing it down someone's throat, which is a very expensive prospect indeed.
Oh, I can only imagine, and it makes me wonder if, you mentioned the masks earlier. I'm wondering if they played a part at all, and I know we might need to explain things a little bit, but did the masks that you mentioned earlier come into your situation?
Absolutely. My go-to mask has been the lone wolf. So let me tell you about wolves. Wolves are naturally pack animals. And the way the alpha wolf, or let's align this with your CEO, your founder, the way the alpha wolf behaves or should behave is that they run from the front to the pack to the back of the pack, make sure everyone's okay, but they're not actually taking any action or taking on the work of the pack. The pack is moving as the pack because of the nod, the strategy, the direction that alpha wolf is taking. But take that alpha wolf, split that alpha wolf off from the pack. Now what you have is a wolf that is vulnerable to attack. It's having to scrounge 100% for its own food. It has no support in terms of warmth, in terms of shelter. So the lone wolf mask is one that I have worn and it's installed. I will tell you that mask is installed from your earlier experiences in life, and you're always looking for evidence to support it. Here I am doing it by myself again. Look at what happened. So fear can be actually finding evidence I'm actually right. And that lone wolf bias goes, yep, there it is again. Yep, I'm by myself again. Yep, I'm working this business by myself again. I can't trust anybody. And that mask interferes with experimentation. When the alpha wolf stays in pack and protects the pack and removes barriers from the pack and does the things that the alpha wolf is designed by nature to do, that alpha wolf is also protected by the pack, and the pack is running together in one direction. So this mask really took some bravery to break because it was installed a long time ago, and I was always looking for evidence that it was true. And today, I can now look at things. I can look in the back in the past and go, yeah, that's a person that was let go a little bit too soon, not because of performance, but because of fear of what would happen if I went through the trouble of retraining and it didn't work. So I just let them go. And that mask interferes with experimentation. It is much harder to do things when you are doing it alone. And that lone wolf also impacts experimentation because at that point, I'm afraid to have the conversations. I'm afraid to have the conversations because what if I'm not right? What if this baby that I have birthed in my head is not viable and I'm going to have to let it go and have loss there of my idea. So the lone wolf starts to apply of I'm willing to talk to less and less people. I'm willing to show up less and less. It creates social anxiety. It does all of these things that are barriers to discovery. So that lone wolf mask has to be intentionally removed by saying, well, maybe this worked for me because, and I know all the evidence that it's worked for me. I've been reinforcing that all my life, but maybe this doesn't work for me because I'm not having the conversations. I'm not running alongside my team. I'm becoming very directive toward my team and they're waiting for me to make decisions. I'm cutting team because I'm afraid they'll hurt me. And we bring our whole selves to our business, and our employees, our team members, they bring their whole selves. So when we understand these masks and we intentionally look at them for, and this has hurt me because we can acknowledge the pain and we can consciously say, no more, no more perfectionist, no more lone wolf. No more firefighter. No more only closer. No more harmonizer who tries to make harmony at the expense of everything else just so everyone's okay. No more of that, because that thing which I thought healed me actually hurt me. And I am now willing to break that mask and to move forward in a way that is free of that bias. And that's what a mask is. A mask like that is experimentation bias. It will put a pair of glasses, a different pair of lenses over anything that you're doing. And if you are willing to unlearn what you think you know, and you are willing to shed the mask, the sky is the limit, Michael. Truly, it is the limit, but it's that which we cling to. It sometimes is the thing that's holding us back.
It makes me think actually of, as you mentioned, biases and the way that we see things. I get the impression that they can hold the progress back. They can hold the scaling back because of the biases. It's almost like the person that is telling everybody things to do, and maybe they're trying to communicate things a certain way, but then someone that, let's just say, might be on the impatient side might go, oh well, they've not done it yet, I looks like I'm doing it again, and then they then go off. And sometimes as well, I imagine you would go further faster with everyone that worked together versus one person trying to do everything. That's just a weird sort of example based on what you've said there. What are some of the ways that we can get through this? Or are there any ways that people can actually scale companies faster once they've overcome their masks and their biases?
So there is a classic bit of research by Peter Senge in a book called The Fifth Discipline. And it talks about the reflexive loop. The reflexive loop, everyone has it. It's in your brain, and it acts as if your eyes, your body is like a video camera recording everything. And you capture this information, and from this information, you attach a belief to that. And that belief could be based on past experience. It certainly is the core of the mask, is that belief. And then from that belief, you make an assumption. And from that assumption, you have a thought, and that thought then can turn into action. And the reflexive loop can become very dangerous. And again, we all have this reflexive loop, we all do it when we don't ask a question, when we don't check our assumption. So, in order not to have this happen, you need to, when you recognize that you're in this reflexive loop, that you're making these assumptions, that you have the courage, you have the bravery to ask the one question, and to ask any question but why, if you want to get to the facts, or if you want to get to the emotional bottom of something, do ask why. Do touch the heart and ask why, if you feel that it is a heart question. But to ask that question, to break the reflexive loop, and sometimes that question can be, I observed this. And when I observed this, I felt this and I imagined this. Is that true? Is that imagination true? And then someone could go, oh gosh, no, no, this is what I intended. And all of a sudden, what seemed like a really big problem is actually not a problem at all. It's a phantom. And that phantom could have been acted on, creating chaos. So it's important to understand and to recognize when we are in that reflexive loop, and how to inquire into that so that we don't create that wreckage.
It sounds as well like the self-awareness part is important as well. Like if you know what you're doing, then would that make a difference as well? Like you mentioned before that you were wearing the lone wolf mask and you were able to ask the right questions, you were able to shortcut some of it. Is it important to understand yourself as well?
Absolutely. And that's why that is after the pause, step one of critical opportunity thinking in the critical opportunity method is that you need to come into awareness, consciousness, and humility. And humility is either I'm not too good to do this, nor am I not good enough for this. When you can bring yourself into that middle space and recognize when you, as a leader, are triggered, you can recognize that and you can pick, well, what's the small experiment that I'm going to do with myself? What's that one thing that I can do to get myself out of this place? What is the one question I will ask? What is the one breath I will take? And when you come into that, you can begin to know yourself a little bit better. I was in a yoga class once at Wanderlust, and it was an incredibly powerful class because they had us really root down into the ground. And it was a partner exercise. So you're going to really root yourself into the ground and you're going to be immovable. And you're going to tell your body, I am immovable. And when that was done, the partner then tried to pick the other person up and they couldn't. They couldn't. They were rooted so far down. And that's how we get when we tell our bodies this is what, the situation is. But when we realize that our bodies are actually incapable of lying, that is a really interesting thing there. Because when we begin to feel like the mask is coming up, when we feel like we are about to act from a place of assumption or bias versus open curiosity, when we realize that we are not willing to unlearn what we think we know. In fact, we know best, and that's it. End of story. Not going to do it. Our bodies feel something. We feel it in our throat. We feel it in our chest. We feel it in our stomach. We feel it in our head. But our bodies will start talking. And when we're tuned in, and that's why it's so important if you are a top leader of an organization to really work on yourself, work on your body, because your body will tell you things. And if you actively ignore it and you don't question it into it, you will come in like a wrecking ball into your organization. And why? Because you're triggered and because you've got a mask up and because you're doing anything and everything you can to validate that you are right.
That's a very interesting point where we end up trying to confirm the things that we already know. Loads of people, myself included at times, can be guilty of that. How would you suggest that it's actually workaroundable? It's a weird way of putting it. But is it possible to work around it? Is it something that we can learn to deal with or handle? How do you think about it?
I think the first step to working around it is to acknowledge it, to acknowledge that, this is one of my masks. I have a mastercast where I interview people and I talk to them about their leadership journeys and their frameworks, and then we look at which masks they may or may not be wearing. But you are not going to recognize what mask you're wearing until you yourself admit it to yourself. And take the shame and the blame off of it. The important thing about awareness, consciousness, and humility is that humility piece that you're not beating yourself up for this. You are not lower than dirt because this is you, and you're not too good to, be self-aware or what have you. That self-awareness is important because it teaches you are engaging in self-leadership before you lead others. I am always inspired when I hear how individuals do this. And I was told that Oprah Winfrey has a door frame trigger. And her door frame trigger, when she walks through the door of any room, she says, I am responsible for the energy that I bring into this room. And then she walks through the door and she holds herself in accountability to the energy that she is bringing into her discussions. My one of my former mentors, Brendan Burchard, he has a door frame trigger, and his door frame trigger is also all about the energy that he brings in his room, and he uses to bring greater energy when he comes into a room. So if your audience can think of, okay, well, what is the door frame trigger? And maybe it's, am I wearing any masks right now that is going to lessen my ability to be open to what I hear in this room? Am I a firefighter? Am I wanting to solve every problem? And suddenly my team stops thinking for themselves. Am I the only closer? And I'm going to insist if there is a big sales call that gets announced in this room that I immediately volunteer to join it, thus decreasing the confidence of my sales team that they can handle the big closes. What masks am I wearing? Like I said, there are 10 masks that I've identified, and they're protective masks, like I'm protecting you from something, or control masks. I'm controlling myself or controlling you. And protection is also about self-protection as well. But these masks serve, and they serve well. So self-awareness is important, because how in the world are you going to lead others if you can't lead yourself?
That's a very good point, and it makes me wonder actually, how does fear come into this? Because you mentioned taking some actions out of fear earlier, letting the worries and the speed get the better of you and others as well. Does fear play a part, and how do you suppose someone in this leadership position can get around or through their fears when, especially from the outside looking in, maybe in air quotes, you're not allowed to feel fear, so you're not necessarily allowed to show it.
So fear is, and I've heard so many acronyms for fear: false evidence appearing real, face everything and rise, finding evidence you're actually right. All of these acronyms have a piece of it, but we talk about getting around fear, and it's not going around it. Fear is installed as a part of you for a purpose. There is no make wrong to fear. Fear is just another thing to experiment into. Like, oh, I'm feeling this. And sometimes you have to do it scared. As a business owner, we're doing it scared most of the time. We are doing it scared, or we are not moving forward. But fear has a biological purpose. And that's the reason why the trauma responses come up. It's fight, flight, freeze, fawn, or there's another F word that you do when you're in fear as well. And these exist for that self-protection or that control of a situation. So first you need to acknowledge that, okay, I'm scared of this. Like, this is scary. Okay, well, what's scary about it? What specifically is scary about it? And how can I do one micro experiment to lead me through this fear and get me to the other side? So I'll tell you a story. I was driving across the mountain passes of the Sierra Nevada mountains, and it was one of those times where you're driving past Kirkwood Resort down, Highway 88. And what you do is you climb up to a summit, and then once you crest the summit, then you begin to dip down, and you dip down into the Carson Valley. And it was incredibly foggy, and it was snowing. And I was absolutely terrified. Absolutely white knuckle on the steering wheel, perfectly terrified. And as I would go further and further up, the fog would get more dense. I knew, having driven this road before, on my right side, there was a sheer cliff drop off. And to my left side, there's oncoming traffic and a rock face. So what are my options here? And this equates to fear as well, because what some people do in the face of fear is they stop. They pull off to the other side of the road. Now, does that get me to the other side of the fog? Maybe tomorrow, but also what it could do is somebody else could come along and rear end me, and off the cliff I go. I could try to turn around, but there's really no place to turn around. So if I tried to turn around, I could run myself off a cliff. If I do successfully turn around, I've just delayed my outcome. So what did I do? I held to the yellow line and I began to follow that yellow line up, knowing that that yellow line was a constant. Even with fear, experimentation strategy works. That yellow line for me, and everyone has a different yellow line. For me, experimentation strategy holds me solid through it because I can move forward slowly, slowly and hug that yellow line and tell and go where the experiment tells me to go. And then suddenly I have crested and I'm down and I'm in the clear and I'm home. That yellow line can be experimentation strategy in business. In your personal life, it could be your spirituality. It could be anything where you have that constant that is going to tell you where to go. So moving through that fear of the fog, of the snow, of the sheer cliff drop off, of the rock face, of oncoming traffic, that's a lot of fear. But when I hold to that one thing, that yellow line. And the experimentation in that case is if I trust that the yellow line is going to tell me where to go, can I move forward safely at a certain speed? Yes, I can. Now, does that remove all barriers? Does that remove all fears? Absolutely not. There's still the fear that, oh, I'm going too slow. Someone's going to come up behind me. They're going to want to get around me. I can think of a million things. And you know what? You could fortune tell yourself right into panic that way. Or you could be willing to unlearn what you think you know, move forward through the fog, move through the fear, doing it scared, but knowing that that yellow line, that experimentation strategy, that's what's going to get you to the other side. And sometimes the fear you feel, the problems you face, the things that are falling apart is really things crashing together. And you find that out when you hit the valley in your home.
This has been a really fantastic conversation, Diane. It's been incredible. I've enjoyed this, trying to navigate the way that we think, and the idea of self-leadership was really fascinating to learn. And in the spirit of leaving no stone unturned, Diane, is there any last parting words of advice, maybe a story or two that you would like to share?
Absolutely. Absolutely. When we're kids, we try everything. We do anything. We are audacious. We are experimenting constantly as children. And somewhere along the lines, depending on our environments, we become afraid to experiment. So I want to encourage everyone listening maybe to put on a little bit of a different hat. Maybe put on the hat of a curious kid when you're experimenting. Put on that hat, allow yourself to feel that aliveness again that comes from discovery and open up to what is possible versus what you think is not possible. Because when you do, that thing that has been holding you back dissolves, and you look around and go, wow, couldn't have predicted this one. I know it has happened a lot of times in my life and in my business. And the times that I've been in most joy, most ease is when I've just taken that action, held to the experiment, and allowed things to come to me that I never even expected. So I encourage your listeners to do the same.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Diane. Very, very insightful. And for those that are listening that would like to learn more about you, maybe they want to enter your world, how could they do that?
You can enter my world by going to www.peopleriskconsulting.com. Right now, I have a pop up there that will lead you to my Brave Business Mastercast. The Mastercast is a place where you can come be in a live studio audience or maybe even be a guest to absorb more ways to conduct brave business. You can also buy my workbook on Amazon.com, Creating Critical Opportunity. Just search Creating Critical Opportunity on Amazon.com and you'll grab that workbook.
Thanks so much for being a guest on the show. Those that are listening, feel free to subscribe, share the show, tell others, and also leave a review wherever you are listening into your podcasts. Diane, this has been great. I've enjoyed it, and I look forward to keeping in touch. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael. Thanks for having me.